Okay, so today we will be going over several new things. We're going to start out with going over a little bit more about malloc and see how it reserves a chunk of memory and returns a pointer to it so you can copy to there. And this that I've done up in the comments is just a little bit of a memory map that I will fill out after I go ahead and run this program here. So we've got another real basic program that we're going to institute. Int main void. We are just going to declare a character type and make a pointer, P. Once again, please feel free to call me out if I miss a semicolon or mess anything else up. It sometimes may be intentional, sometimes it won't be. Most of the time it's not. I'm just missing things. Now, here at this point, what are we doing? With the malloc, what are we doing with that number 6? Anybody? There, Steven. Somebody type. What are we doing with the number 6? Declared a character type, allocating memory. Yeah, assigning a space in memory that is size 6. So use this string copy, strcpy, p. Okay, you're assigning enough because you've declared it of. You've declared. Just reading what everybody's got. Yeah, you're grabbing the addresses, and what we're going to do here, we're using hello. So we've got 5 characters. Why are we using 6 spaces for that? Why do we have 6 units of space? Yeah, the null terminator. There you go. Excellent. So this is just hypothetical up here, but when you're talking about spaces of memory, let's just say what this is doing if you have your pointer. And this string copy, if you're not familiar with that, is just copying from the source to the destination. So we're copying over this string here, these characters, to these spaces of memory. And then, as I asked about, we have the null terminator and the reason that we have to have. Yep, Tommy, Brad. No, Addison, the way that the program is written out will function here without dereferencing. What do we need after this, now that we've allocated the memory, before we finish? Or what should we have? Yeah, free. We'll step through that in just a second. I'm just reading the comments. A byte for a pointer for a character of char type is 4 bytes. Who asked that? Tommy. There, James posted a good link that I'm guessing from what's in there has the. Yeah, remember yesterday, Nedham, what we had when after we freed it and it was throwing the little poop air. The data, if you're asking, is it going to be accessible in the program? No, it's not. Is it still in the memory as long as it hasn't been overwritten? I'm not 100% sure. It should still be in the hardware in the memory, but no longer accessible once it's been freed. But that's a question Beej would have to clarify. But no, it's not going to be accessible in the program. We remember we demonstrated that the other day. Ryan was saying he thinks characters are 1 byte. I know that integers are 4 bytes. Honestly, probably that list that James put up there would have all those, but I get those confused and I don't want to regurgitate incorrect information. But the main point of this, we'll step through it. After we've copied over the string, now we have hello with the null terminator. And then you see right there that it's no longer, the pointer is giving you Addison's favorite little character over here. And the comments here were just, I mean, these numbers mean nothing, but the comments over here were just to show we have a pointer that's pointing to value, let's say 200 in memory. And then each of these spaces that we've allocated 6 spaces in memory. And each space that we allocate holds a character, a primitive data type, and our null terminator that we had to account for. And then you see, as we run through it, Mr. Hankey. Allocated the memory. Now that the memory is being allocated, we have the spaces here. They say 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now that we have the string copy command that we're copying 2p and we're putting the string hello in there. Now the memory has full. Is the terminator auto assigned? C does auto assign like when we're doing it right here. Yes, you don't have to. The program works without, I don't have to go in and say. I think actually, if you did this, it would try. It would either would just know that you're putting the null terminator in there, but it doesn't matter, and that this is just going to go to that 6th space. I don't think it's notating it here with the color. Yeah. You should still be able to run this, and then we free it. But of course, it ran without it. But if we only assign 5 spaces, I didn't even see Nedham. Good. Two minds thinking alike. I was looking over until I looked over at yours, but that was what I was going to demonstrate. And malloc 5, and when we hit here, you see that we've got a problem. For characters, Nedham, yes, when you're doing this manually. And see right here, if I allocated 8 spaces, the 7th and 8th space are still unoccupied, and then you just go ahead and free the memory, and then the pointer no longer is pointing to anything. But that pretty much is all we were trying to show with this piece of code. Anybody have any questions in general about this before we move forward? Okay. And then we're just going to go back through structs a little bit that we dealt with yesterday. So here we will make an animal, as we did yesterday. Character, name, int, type. I'm going to create an animal. And we're allocating the memory right here for the animal. And allocating the amount of memory that we need for the struct animal that we've declared in lines 1 through 4. And once again, I'm not even going to ask, but the reason we use string length plus the name plus 1 is when you run string length, it does not account for the null terminator. So as we are allocating memory for the name, we need to add 1 additional unit of space. And then we're going to use this same command string copy. And remember, we can use this arrow when we're using pointer to the structs. We would be using the dot notation for structs themselves, the arrow for pointers to the structs. Beej went into that quite a bit yesterday in great detail, actually. And at the end here, we are returning A. What did I do? Did I put it wrong? Yes, I am wrong. I don't even need to look at that. Nice catch, Nedham. Yes. And remember, we don't have to have this, but we demonstrated this the other day, that it's nice to have a helper function to do the memory freeing, and we can then just invoke that. And that way, if someone else is looking at your program, it is easier for them to follow it without having to deal with the specifics of the manual free command. Hold on, James. I'll look at your question in just a second. I see you typed something. Yeah, Addison. James, your question. Tommy said the same thing. And Beej just confirmed it to all. Like when we were talking earlier about and I said I didn't want to answer for sure, but Ryan had said that the characters, the definition or the size of a character. And so this just all gets back to that. Why do we put void in front of these? Somebody answer. It's a question. Yeah, it's because we're not returning. We're not having to. We're not having to set a type for the return. And but I like Addison's answer the best. So this is just a setter, if you want to think of it that way, that we are doing here. Give me 1 second. I'm going to take a drink of water. But yeah, it's because we're not. It's not that we don't need a return. It's that we're not. And you still have to do your return 0 at the end, but we're not returning any specific type or anything substantive. So we have that void in there. Like I said the other day, y'all should be following along on your own with this code. I didn't even think of it yesterday, to be honest, but I could drop all of this code. I know we're doing it in Python Tutor, but I could drop all of this code if anybody wants it later on. So for the setter, we're freeing the name, and then we're reallocating memory for the name, and we're resetting the name. Tommy, are you talking about the code and dropping it in the channel? Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't do that the other day. I was, used to typing, in my editor and that being just kind of intuitive to do that. I can even go back and grab the code from the other day. It won't be right after we're done with GP because I'll be messing with the video, but I definitely can get all this to you guys pretty quick, and that way y'all have a copy of everything that we're doing. But once again, you should be following on your own as well and experimenting around, maybe be able to bring up some questions or points that wouldn't come up just from what I'm talking about. And so then finally, in the main, we are going to say struct animal. We'll use our old friend the goat. I'm going to call create animal. Yeah, Kai, and maybe Beej wants to comment a little bit more on that, but the way that I mean, it's up to you. We're all adults. Everybody can decide what they want to do. But it was mentioned to us that people following along in the Python tutor would be helpful. So, like I said, maybe Beej wants to comment on that, or I can ask him, or it can be brought up in the Q&A he's typing right now. So we'll see what Beej has to say about that. But I will get you all of this code. That was the greater point of. And then we're just simply giving it the name, and we don't want to give the goat 5 legs. We'll give him 4 legs. Then our old friend, the print statement, print F. We're going to point using the arrow operator to the goat name, the goat leg count for the print. Then we'll free the animal. And return. What did. Personally, I always type code in, even if I'm reading from a book. Line 27. What did I. God damn. Excuse me. I don't know why I keep doing that. I think because I call it string. I have no idea, but good catch. All right. Let me go back and look to see what all I maybe missed. Netum, the N needs to go. That may be why it's throwing that error. And that's our problem. Right there. That's why it was throwing the error. But good catches on the string length. I need to get that clear in my mind. Let's see. This should, yes. Got all my braces. Got all of semicolons. Let's try this. And it's going to run. Remember our end goal with this. We'll walk through it real quick, but the end goal was getting it to print. You can see where it's got the goat. Now it's got the name, the pointers. And we go down to the print statement. So used to Visual VS Code adding 2 brackets every time I press the key to. Yeah, that's probably most of my problem too, is I've gotten lazy with a lot of these little, what VS Code provides and what all the extensions provide. And I'm going to make these mistakes. And like I said, I appreciate when people, and we should get it to print goat with 4 legs. Thing we wanted to point out with this set animal name, we've got this code right here. Somebody kept bringing up the word the other day. Instead of freeing, I guess my question is, instead of freeing the name and then doing this decal, basically being a little bit redundant with reallocating the memory or allocating the memory here, what could we do different that would be a little bit cleaner and a little bit quicker? Somebody guess something. It's one word. Yeah, realloc, Netum. Just we do have to have this part because the name doesn't necessarily stay the same length, and the reallocate requires that, and then we just do the string copy. And when we run this, then we have a print statement and we get the same thing. What were you saying, James? James, where were you talking about that? But you just saw there how this code functions the same as the code that we commented out that we used originally. You mean in lieu of this, James, that I just highlighted? Like this, James? I don't know what's going to happen with this, actually, so we'll see. You know, Kai, I wondered the same thing the other day because I didn't add it. But it does crash without it. And I just kind of think of it in terms of, I think the other day when I did it and I didn't include it, I caught it before I ran it and I put it there because I remembered it had to be there. And I just thought of it kind of in terms of the rest of the time, like when we're not dealing with such low level languages, and there is that semicolon when we are dealing with objects. But these are some specific questions you can bring up in the Q&A with Beej later on. We need to move on because we've got a lot left to cover. Yeah. Um, I, yeah, I was for some reason, the internet still, the first 5 weeks I didn't have any problems, but ever since then, normally when they've torn things up in the past, the power company and the internet companies are surprisingly fast at getting things back online and getting things working again. But they messed up a lot of stuff this last time. So today it's still acting a little bit funny. I was explaining that to Beej, and it's not just, I even made sure it wasn't my device or anything in particular or one ISP, but everything's acting funny. But it'll be just like the other day, if it chops out, the video is going to keep recording here locally. That's why I've got it doing locally and not to the cloud, and then I upload it to the cloud. So is this transmitting okay? Cool. All right, somebody tell me something about fork. We're getting into process. Yes, it creates a child process, and we're getting into the processes today. So basically, the moment fork returns, you have a new process, and it returns twice. It returns once to the parent and once to the child. The return values are different for the parent and the child. The parent sees the fork return the child's process ID, and the child sees fork return 0. And we'll code that out in a little short piece of code so that you get a better idea of that. The child, the process ID is a type. We'll see that as well. And it's a positive integer, but it is its own type, just like int and char are a type. And just a basic, something I've got in my notes that's from Beej is that processes form a tree, like a family tree. So you can just think of it, every time you fork out, you're just branching down or up or whatever direction you want to think of it as in that tree. And child process, the last thing to note is that child processes get their own copy of all the variables. They cannot change the value in the parent. So here we'll demonstrate declare an integer. Like I said, this is a type, and we'll just name it PID. And we'll just put a simple we'll give you a break after we get done with short break after we're done with the fork. And remember the values that we talked about it returning. So we know if it's equal to 0 because because it has 2 returns, then it's the child if it's 0. And intuitively, if it's not the child, then it's the parent because there's only one other option. I think I've got all this right in here, just looking at it. Let's see what people. Kai and Addison, I want to see what Beej puts here. But this is something y'all can talk about in the GP a little bit, or in the Q&A with Beej. Just reading what Beej put here real quick. Yeah, like Addison was talking about earlier, when you're requesting to the operating system. Anybody know why it's throwing this error? We're saying unknown type name PID. I'm not going to waste much time on it. I just wanted to demonstrate this for everybody that Python Tutor has its limitations. There may be some fancy way around it. You can read more about it here in the unsupported features, but you're not going to be able to use it to play around with everything. And when you go into that unsupported features, there's some types that it doesn't support. So that said, from here on out today, be running everything in the editor. And of course, what, I haven't been having to include earlier with the Python. Do we need to include a lib? Yeah, everything that we've got up here, I was just about to say that, Nedham. What we haven't been having to do, because Python Tutor just covers it for us, obviously, like when you're working on your own code, we do have to include these different libraries at the top. So from here on out, I'll be including those that we're using. This is the same exact code that I had in the Python Tutor that did not work. The only difference is I added these as well because, of course, when we're actually compiling these on our computers, it doesn't know that like Python Tutor does. So then down on my command line, and truthfully, hopefully I can remember and we'll call it intro, and I've got this saved as intro.c, gcc wall extra intro to C. And we can ignore that warning. Then I should just be able to say intro.c. There. We get I'm the child, I'm the parent. No, James, and this is actually the code that I opened up that I had ready was the next code that I was going to use when we talked about weight, and I screwed up and left that in my editor. I didn't want to have to retype everything in the editor after I demonstrated that Python Tutor would not work for this type here. So if we take that out, this is the same code that we had before. And if I save that, and it's yelling about the undeclared. And then we get I'm the parent, I'm the child, and the piece of code that I accidentally ran that we'll go over after we take a quick break with the weight, make sure that the child actually prints first. In this case, we got the parent and then the child, which is what I should have been demonstrating. That was my mistake. But the idea that we're showing here is, the fork, the takeaway from it is the fork creates a child process. It returns twice to the parent and to the child. The parent gets the child's process ID. The child gets a 0 for the return. The PID is a type, a specific type that we see Python Tutor does not cover, and it's a positive integer. The PID1 is the process that is the ancestor of all the other processes, that it forms a tree, and that the child process cannot change the values in the variables. They're just getting a copy of what is in the parent. And when we come back, I'm going to give you all a 5-minute break. It's 8 after the hour, so at about 13 after the hour, we'll get started again. Grab a cup of coffee. I'm going to pause the share. All right. Everybody should be back from break now. I see the question that got asked about why it's executing both. And I asked Beej if he would come up with a better explanation because my wording of it probably isn't the best. I'm just reading what everybody's typing here real quick. Why is it carrying both conditions of the if else? The idea is one time and not another. OP is an iterator. And Beej is probably going to word this better or correct. But when you call this fork and you've initiated this child process, so you're going to have two returns off of it. So this if else that we have here is going to account for both of the returns. So the first return that goes through when we ran it the right way, not the way that we did it with the wait when I put the wrong code up there. The parent returns first, so that part, this is bypassed and we print. Then the child returns and this fires. Then we saw with the wait, which we're going to discuss now, how we control the order of the return. But once you've called this fork process, this gets run the two times because of the two returns. Does that make sense? And then what add? The two returns, when a fork, remember what we were saying, Stephen, it returns twice. When you fork and make a child process, it has two returns. One returns to the parent, one returns to the child. Remember, the parent gets the child's process ID, this type that Python tutor wouldn't handle that made me shift into my editor, and the child receives a 0 for the return. Yes, it resolves twice. So once we've called this process here on line 10, and we have this if else, and then this line that we'll just deal with in a minute, this if else is accounting for both returns because there's two returns. So yes, it's having to resolve it twice. So if we're not controlling it with the wait that I accidentally previewed, the parent returns first in this case, and we get, I'm the parent down here, and then the child returns, and we get, I'm the child. And then we exit out. Stephen, are you asking, does the parent always return first with the parent ID? The child gets the 0. The parent gets the ID. Are you asking in this case that we're not controlling with the wait statement? Is the parent always going to return first? I'm just not understanding what specifically you're asking. Yes, what Brad's writing in the positive integer is this type, this specific type, is the return that goes to the parent. It's the process ID that's generated, and it's a positive integer. I guess the question similar to Stephen's is, if we can only have one parent and multiple children, why wouldn't the parent be 0? If we have two children, one of them can't be PID 0. Children, one of them can't. But every time, oh, and that's what you're talking about up top, Stephen, before like three comments up. When we're doing what we were talking about, like with a tree, and we're branching down, so we call a fork within a fork. That is something that you can code out if you play around with it in the code, but that would be better to wait for the Q&A simply because we only have 40 minutes left here and we still need to go over a minimum of two different things. Yeah, I understand what you're asking. Yeah, let's move on, and that would be a good one for that. Probably all the questions that would come up, that would be a great one for the QA because you can code that out and see why, but we just don't have the time here right now with only 40 minutes remaining. So I'm going to move on to the weight. And I think someone asked it up above about the the process ID and under the hood, how that was generated. And honestly, I have no idea. If you want to know that, like I said, that's not a time issue. I don't exactly know under the hood what's happening and see with the process ID or having that get assigned. I recalled seeing somebody ask that a little further up, and I didn't get around to it. So I have no clue about that. This other question that you're asking, Stephen, would be best for the Q&A where it can be coded out or messing with on your own, and it becomes pretty clear. Um, so with the weight, obviously, we didn't need this piece earlier. I'm going to leave this up here, and I'll just go back through. So basically, what the weight is doing, put in simple terms, and we saw it earlier, where we're going to have the parent is going to return first, like we saw down here, and then the child will return because obviously you're very quickly going to have a return to the parent, but the child process may have quite a bit of things that it's doing, so the child process will return after. But what we can do, and we've just got all our includes up here that we need. The type is the reason we have this types up here is for the, I saw James typing, but I guess he stopped typing. We've got our typical, their input output, and we're going to include the weight in here for this, and we'll include the types right here because we're using the PID type. So what we're going to do here, and like I said, I'm just typing this back out, is we're going to use a wait, and the parent process can wait for a child process to die. Basically, you can think of it that the parent sleeps until then. And we just demonstrate that like we did. We're going to fork again. And have our if else. And then we're going to have our wait. Why is it doing that? Uh, You read what you feel, all right? Like if we call for it before, I have the children. Nedham, you're saying that the weight is not in your. Just reading what James put down there earlier. Yeah, I have no idea why it's doing that. I haven't seen that come up before with my stuff or any student stuff. If anybody has any clue about the question Nedham is asking, otherwise, I'll find out after the GP and get back with you if you don't resolve it. So obviously, that's something you need to get resolved before the Q&A, so you can get with your PM and or with me, and we can figure that out. I have no idea why it's doing that without researching it, but we'll get that straightened out. Help if I saved this first. I was wondering why it said it was an undeclared variable. And fixing my errors. That's just the warning. And then we can say run it. And as you saw earlier when I brought the wrong code up, this waited for the child process to die before the parent process returned. And we get this for a return. And Kai, my Mac looks, I think, a 2017, and Chrome is constantly chewing it up. I don't think that ever changes. See, James is saying that the problem that you were having, Nedham, comes as a warning, but it still works. So, and the takeaway from this is that for whatever reason you may need to do it in your code, you can wait for the child process to die with this wait. You do have to include it up top where we were talking about that Nedham was having a problem, and you can just wait, because if you take this out and simply compile everything again, you get the reverse of that. And then we have one more function to talk about, and then that's the exec that I just dropped in the channel. Anybody want to comment on that or have any idea what it does from what you've already seen? Yeah, exactly, James. The exec system call is used in order to run a program that's different from the calling program, since fork only executes copies of the program that called it. That is a very good explanation of what the family of functions that is very similar to OOP, if you think about it in that way, but not OOP. Yep, it's just replacing the current process with the program named in the call, to put it really short. So if we wanted to demonstrate that in the code, you don't have to have anything in particular that you, other than what we've used already. We'll just go ahead. Again, polymorph. And we're going to fork again. Just name it PID. I don't like that name. The PID equals 0, meaning that it's the child. And we'll go ahead and put an error. I don't think we've gone over this before. And this right here is included here. You don't have to have anything in additional in the standard input output. And we can exit with the exit code of 1. And we'll have an else. And we're just once again going to make sure the child runs first. Our print statement, because the return wasn't 0, it was our positive integer of that type. I'm missing something. I feel like I'm missing a curly brace. No, I don't think. And we just get the warnings. Run the intro. And it's executing just in the command line, like if we were to put that command in the command line. And it's showing everything that I've got on my desktop. So there's not much on the surface, James, to include in with this other than that family of functions replaces the current process with the program named in the call. And when we're naming in the call, we're just asking it to execute what we've got in there. And this is just the error message is just in case we had an error and it was included in the standard input output, but we shouldn't be reaching that point. But if we did something like this, if it'll even let it compile, did let it compile, and it should throw the error, or it's just going to read it. Yeah, and it's just saying it's throwing the error that we expected right here. I think you could even go up into here and I did not know you knew that. Hmm. Is there any questions about any of the things we've gone over since break? As you work through the repos, you'll be using these today. Their uses will probably become a lot more clear to you, and the difficulties and the fun associated with it will become more apparent. Let's see, people are typing. So Kai, you're asking about up on line 12, on line 11? Forget about, okay, 12 through 13, don't even think about. This right here, for 12 to 13, this is included in this standard input output. If this doesn't work for some reason, like I was showing, if I did like this, if I recompiled it, typing in, it's just going to throw, that error. That's all that a line at 11, and then it exits with the exit code 1. What? So don't even worry about this. The 12 is just if we took this out and ran the same thing, we just don't get that error message. We generated the error message with this built-in function of C. That's all that we're doing, is just doing an error message from there. On line 11, okay, remember that remember, like we were talking about earlier with the fork, how we're going back into the operating system, like Addison was asking about, and there was a discussion in there that this is accessing the operating system, correct? So this is the directory I'm currently in. If I put this command in the directory, it's showing everything that's on my desktop, all the folders on my desktop. This exec is a family of functions that, like we were talking about earlier when we introduced it, it replaces the current process with the program named in the call. So we're just running this, and instead of you're in the, I'm trying to think of a good way to word this. It's executing the same as if I type in ls and hit enter here. If I run this program, it's doing the same thing. It's just a demonstration. It's just a demonstrative program showing what it's capable of doing. There's no particular reason we did it. It's just, yeah, it's running that command in my terminal. Like I was trying to do it with the, I don't know if it would work, but I think this would do the same thing. Stephen, I'll answer that in just a few seconds. It's not letting me demonstrate it that way. Well, remember when we had the error, Stephen, your question, why not just printf something if it doesn't matter, or why use that specifically? It gives us nothing if we have an error. When we use this p error, remember I did something up here when I went through and did this. And it's giving this gives your this is giving more information about the error right here when we use the p error. And then you do have to exit with the, if you don't exit, you have to exit it with the exit code 1 to exit out of that specific line. Let me go back and look at these other questions. I had to include, for this to work, Yvette, I'm not sure of why. It should just be included in the standard in here. I don't know why you had to do that to get it to work. James posted a good link. There. See what. And did that answer everything that people had asked? I think we went back through. Didn't. It's a good link that James put up there. This is way more than I knew about this. Yeah, some of these specific questions, like what James had, the exec VP versus exec LP, I don't know. Be definitely good to bring up in Q&A to talk about. And you're going to be using everything that we've demonstrated here in your work, so that might make it a little bit more clear if you get working on that. And you'll have your Q&A at the same time. This is fairly complicated, not as complicated as like when Beej was talking the other day about the questions that came up when he was saying that 99% of the C programmers out there wouldn't know the answer. Some of these questions, like the different types that are in that exec family, are above what I've reviewed, above what I know, above what we learned. So yeah, it would be good to go through what James posted, go through with your own questions, and go through and mess with the code in your own editor and have a set of questions ready for Beej, and he should be able to answer them for you at that time. In the meantime, I want to drop the link just in case there's any question for your new repo. I'm sure most of you have this. I'm just getting the link right now. This is your repo for the day and for tomorrow, not just for today. Yeah, and like Ryan's saying, and like I was saying earlier, this is to give you a general overview of what you'll be dealing with and what it does, as are the videos. And for your work that your independent project that you'll be working on today and the next 2 days, today and tomorrow, will probably make this a lot more clear. And just for these really specific questions, have them ready for the Q&A, which will be at the same time with Beej. Um, And if there wasn't anything else, are there any general questions about today, tomorrow, Friday? If not, it's about 10 till the hour. Everybody can turn loose, go to lunch, get started. Remember to add your PM as a collaborator on your new repo and go through the typical workflow that we go through. As always, coverage during the lunch hours for any questions. I would encourage people to get started on this ASAP. I know a lot of people were working pretty late last night to get to the MVP on the first repo that we had, and this one is, It's no more simple. It may be a little bit more intuitive because you finally got your hands on C and you've been working with it, but it's certainly not easy and there's plenty to do with it. And if there's any questions, post them in the channels, get with your PM, DM me if you can't get a hold of anybody, and enjoy and go take a break and enjoy your lunch.